You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you an episode from Lifeline, offering a holistic wellness approach focused on supporting American law enforcement, promoting resilience, safety, and survivability.
Welcome to Precinct 444, everyone. This is Troy Anderson, Executive Director of the National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial Fund Officer Safety and Wellness Programs with another edition of Lifeline. And joining me here today is Bill Alexander, Chief Executive Officer at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. Thank you for joining us, Bill.
Thank you, Troy. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Today we have a special guest, Arthur Flattich, who is the Managing Vice President, Field Sales East at MissionSquare Retirement. Art has an extensive experience in retirement education and financial services for public sector employees. We're excited to have him here to share his insights. MissionSquare is an incredible company that's not only in the business of supporting financial wellness of first responders, but also one of the National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial Fund's leading sponsors, without whom we would not have our ambassador program. Bill, you want to start us off?
Well, I really appreciate that, Troy. Thank you so much. And I just, to some degree, want to echo some part of your comments there. You know, I suspect our audience is well aware, but the Memorial Fund, the place that exists to maintain our very sacred memorial and operate the museum, where we try to tell the story of many of the men and women whose names are on our walls and tell the story of their profession, it would not be possible without generous donors from across the country. And to some degree, the several corporate partners who are willing to support us. We as an organization have existed since the very first day entirely on donations. We have never received so much as a penny from any federal, state, or local government. And we could not do the work that we do all year in terms of honoring our fallen heroes or telling their stories without the very generous support of organizations like MissionSquare. So for my part, let me say very publicly and very loudly, we are incredibly appreciative for MissionSquare and their continued support of us. And it really is an absolute pleasure to bring in and meet Arthur Flattich from MissionSquare to talk a little bit about to some degree, their products and also how those products interface with public safety broadly. Some of the financial issues that I think Troy and I would both echo are undoubtedly facing those very same members in public safety. And there's some solutions out there to preemptively deal with a lot of those problems that public safety employees are probably facing. And that is in part what we're here to talk about today. So before we dive into those solutions, Art, why don't you tell us a little bit about you? What is your background and how did you get involved in retirement services for public safety employees?
Well, first, Bill and Troy, I just want to say thank you very much for having me on your podcast today. It's an absolute honor to be here. I also want to sincerely thank your listeners for their service and dedication to our communities and for their commitment and sacrifice. I want your listeners to know they do not go unnoticed. So, Bill, you asked about my background. So just very quickly, I've been with MissionSquare Retirement for 28 years, holding various leadership roles. I currently oversee a team of more than 100 associates who provide educational services to MissionSquare's clients all across the United States. My previous roles included overseeing the Eastern Division as Managing Vice President, and before that, overseeing the Southeast region as Vice President, where I directed local leaders and representatives in helping public sector employees achieve retirement success. Bill and Troy, I can tell you it's really been extremely gratifying to be part of the MissionSquare team and really support the work being done to help public service workers achieve their financial goals. I'm really looking forward to this time together, and I hope that whatever information is shared will be very helpful for your listeners.
Well, thank you, Art. From your experience, what are some of the common financial challenges faced by rookie law enforcement officers out in the field?
Troy, that's a really good question. And what we know from the work being done at the MissionSquare Research Institute is that public sector workers, including rookie cops, often face the challenge of managing their finances on a relatively modest starting salary. This is because they're also dealing with the high cost of living and likely student loan debt as well. Additionally, these rookie cops may not yet be fully aware of the importance of starting to save early for retirement, which can dramatically impact their long-term financial security.
Yeah, Art, you're talking about sort of, rookie police officers and having those stars in their eyes, thinking about their retirement, but they think it's so far away. that they're not really necessarily making the smartest decisions or the smartest possible decisions for their financial future, thinking it's so far away. Of course, Troy and I are both retired law enforcement officers. Troy from the Connecticut State Police, and I work for the Prince George's County Police Department just outside of DC. And I think both of us can relate, both personally in terms of how we were feeling when we started our police careers many years ago, but also some of our peers, thinking about some of our peers. Troy, what are your thoughts? What have you noticed, both personally and perhaps with your peer group, thinking about those early days as a young police officer? What do you think about rookie cops and their decisions or thought process on their financial future?
Certainly, I think while the cost of living has continued to increase, and I know that many officers struggle with things like student loans and that sort of thing, we really tend to put off saving for retirement. I think that's something that we think will be something we'll do in our 5th or 10th or 15th year, but retirement sneaks up on us quickly. And as we all know, it is sort of an industry standard. I think that law enforcement officers tend to retire younger. I really, as I look back on my younger self, if I had given myself some advice, maybe that advice would have been to get into saving a little bit earlier. And I think that the same was true with my peers. I saw several of them put that off until they were, I think, up against the wall, and maybe it was, they felt like it might have been too late. And whether it was or not, who knows? But I think that's from where I stood, and certainly where I see what I see now with law enforcement across the country. I think that putting off retirement saving and retirement planning, I think is a real issue for sure.
Yeah, those are really solid, important points. I'm thinking, young police officers particularly are really facing two challenges. One, trying to convince young police officers that they actually need to save beyond their retirement. I think lots of young police officers think, oh, I have this financial guarantee into my retirement years. Almost certainly that financial guarantee or the retirement package will be less than what they would otherwise be making at the time they retire. So they're not going to get 100% of their base pay. So those two challenges really are convincing young police officers that they need to save something beyond whatever is in their retirement. And then when do you start that saving? So Art, I'm really interested. Can you help, explain to the audience why it's important to start saving so early for their retirement?
Bill, you and Troy really hit the nail on the head with a lot of those very good points. So maybe let me just give you some numbers to help illustrate and drive home that point. If we took a $3,000 annual investment and assumed a 6% annual growth rate starting at the age of 20, and Bill, we'd have to make some assumptions here. And so we would just say that we would reinvest all of those earnings and that no taxes would be paid. That money would grow to approximately $679,000 by the age of 65. Now, Bill, if you use those same assumptions and compare that to approximately $254,000 if you start at the age of 35 instead of age 20, and approximately $120,000 if you start at age 45 instead of 20. So you can see how these numbers really help illustrate how saving early for retirement is very, very important.
Yeah, it's oftentimes really hard to sort of wrap your brain around compounding interest and what that equates to over a long period of time. And these numbers are really good examples for young officers to really understand the massive impact that could really allow them to do things in their retirement years that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do if they have not already started that saving product. Art, we've sort of been talking about saving, having sort of a nest egg. There's some other financial products in the arena that public safety officers should at least be mindful of. I'm curious, what other advice would you have for young police officers to help prepare them financially for the future, even beyond saving?
Yeah, well, I would say two things. First, saving is very, very important, Bill. And so there are some supplemental retirement savings plans like 457 deferred compensation programs. These types of plans allow public safety officers to save additional monies for retirement and are really normally offered through their employer as part of a benefits package. Secondly, rookie cops should really plan for potentially earlier than planned retirement due to the demands of the job. If they were to retire early, that means the longer the retirement they would have and the longer their retirement income would need to last.
Bill, can you share some stories about what officers sometimes do to make ends meet?
Well, of course, I'm preaching to the choir to some degree here, Troy. I know that you know this. Police officers enter into a field where they really do have a lot of sort of extra income opportunities. Some of those opportunities are really, say, the overtime based opportunities. Every single police department that I'm aware of almost always needs some spare patrol officers, say, out on the street or for some special assignment. So a lot of those are really overtime initiative based. And then many times in the community, there will be businesses that are looking to hire, say, a police officer as a part-time security gig. And so officers do take on those sort of secondary employment kinds of opportunities. And that really creates two issues for young police officers, or even more veteran police officers. Is one, it does allow the police officer to live at a higher standard of living. And I don't know that every police officer, certainly young police officers, are considering the impact of that financial, where they are living and perhaps beyond their means when they eventually retire. And two, it also creates a number of sort of health and stress and officer safety and wellness related issues as they are working countless hours and really beginning to burn out over time.
Yeah, it makes some valid points. Art, we know the health challenges faced by law enforcement officials and first responders. They can be quite unique. Can you shed some light on some of these challenges and the impact they have on the lives of these individuals?
Absolutely, Troy. Though I should be clear, I'm obviously not a medical professional. I am aware of some of the issues impacting law enforcement personnel and first responders. For example, according to one study by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, shift work among public safety workers can lead to increased stress, depression, weakened immune systems, and a higher risk of heart disease. There was another study with a very long name, Troy, which is the Buffalo Cardio Metabolic Occupational Police Stress Study, referred to as the BCOPS. And that study found that officers working night shifts had a 70% higher rate of poor sleep quality compared to those on day shift. And as you know, poor sleep quality and chronic stress can elevate cortisol levels, increase blood pressure, leading to potentially serious cardiovascular problems if left untreated. Additionally, studies show that high-pressure situations officers often find themselves in can be the root cause of various health-related issues. Chronic stress from these situations can put officers at a higher risk for mental health issues such as PTSD and depression due to frequent exposure to traumatic experiences. So these physical and mental health challenges, Troy, can mean an early retirement for many public safety workers. And this makes it critically important for officers to have a robust financial planning in place to ensure their financial security throughout a potentially longer retirement period.
Arthur, how can financial planning help officers who are juggling with multiple jobs or relying on overtime and dealing with other job-related stressors?
Yeah, I think creating a budget and setting financial goals can really go a long way in helping officers potentially find a better way to allocate their resources. And really, Troy, those two steps alone can help officers build a more secure financial future.
Troy, I know we've touched sort of on a couple of these generic issues, but I'm curious, looking back, if you cycle back a few years, what are some of the lessons that you have learned about financial planning over the years that you wish you knew you could go back and tell a younger Troy Anderson sitting in that academy chair? What are those lessons that you think?
If you're talking about turning back the clock a couple decades, I remember being in that chair, and I remember having some financial folks come in to talk about a 457 plan. And I thought to myself, retirement seems forever away. And at that time, 50 or 55 seemed like it was a millennia away. And, I wish that if I could go back, I would have said, not only get in on the ground floor, but get in as aggressively as you can afford to get in. I think I went in rather light in hindsight. And the fact that I got in was good. But if I could tell myself the truth would be you can do without a little bit and put a little bit more into this retirement savings, because as I'm now, I think I don't want to say entering the twilight of my years, but as I'm in the middle part, I'm realizing that while I'm very grateful for the decisions that I made with my financial planning, had I been a bit more aggressive, I think I'd be breathing a little bit more sigh of a relief right now. But that's definitely what I would tell my younger me.
Yeah, I absolutely echo those comments. If somehow I could, current Bill Alexander is a little upset with past Bill Alexander for not having taken advantage of a number of these financial products. Art, I'm curious, you probably have a unique view. What, in your view, what are some common misconceptions that, young police officers have about retirement planning?
Yeah, Bill, the biggest misconception I see is that many believe their pension alone will be sufficient for a comfortable retirement. However, there are some considerations like rising healthcare costs and the increase of the normal cost of living just over time. So this means that really additional savings for retirement on top of pension income is really often necessary. I would just say these additional savings could help bridge any potential gap between their expected expenses in retirement and then the income they receive from their pension.
Art, what are some other considerations when planning for retirement that maybe we haven't already discussed?
Yeah, I would encourage your listeners to think about what kind of retirement lifestyle they want to have, when they want to retire, and how long that retirement might be. And I would point out that the earlier you retire, the shorter the period you have to accumulate funds, and the longer those retirement funds are going to need to last.
Yeah, Art, of course, Troy and I are living examples, but I'm absolutely convinced that the idea that you can just you could survive, but you're not going to live your best, certainly most comfortable life if you have in this your brain that you are just going to be able to live like you have been living at the same level just off of your retirement. And I think that's really one of the key points that we're trying to push here. But I'm curious from your perspective, how can officers go about estimating what they need in retirement? How can they estimate what their expenses are, what their income will likely be? How is that process done?
Yeah, good question, Bill. So officers can really estimate their retirement expenses and income by first with some considerations. How their actual expenses will change, such as mortgage payments decreasing, healthcare costs increasing as they get closer to retirement. Officers can also estimate their retirement income from other sources like Social Security, any individual savings, and their traditional employer pension. Many websites have online calculators that will help in this area, or your listeners can connect with their employer's retirement plan provider, who will likely also have a representative who can assist.
Art, what are some of the tax advantage savings vehicles officers can use?
There are really two that I think of that come to mind first. And really, officers can take advantage of 457 plans. Those are referred to as deferred compensation programs. There are also traditional IRAs. IRA stands for individual retirement accounts. And those vehicles offer tax deferral, which really help officers grow their money more effectively over time.
Art, I'm curious, inflation in terms of how does that inflation impact retirement planning? If you were to go back in time and ask a 21-year-old Bill Alexander, he would not be able to explain to you at all what inflation is or how it might impact the life of a police officer. And certainly most now in recent times, of course, we're talking in the spring of 2025. I think everyone is well aware of what inflation is and how it can impact, say, your day-to-day life. And how much it might cost you to live, say, today. But even with that sort of knowledge that's come to the forefront in recent months, I still don't know that a lot of people think about inflation in terms of 10, 20, 30 years away and how that might impact your retirement. And from your view, how does inflation impact retirement planning?
Yeah, Bill, this is a really important question because inflation absolutely reduces the purchasing power of today's dollars. And this means that the money you have in your retirement account today will likely not be able to buy the same amount of goods and services in the future because, as I think Bill and you, Troy, have experienced over your career, there's likely going to be a broad increase in the cost of goods and services over time. So it's really important to account for inflation in your retirement planning. This will help ensure your savings will be sufficient to cover your expenses in the future. And Bill, many of those online calculators I referenced earlier will allow your officers to factor in inflation when projecting income in retirement.
Oh, that's great.
I'd just like to remind all of our listeners, or at least inform them, that you should join us on April 25th, which is coming right up, for a financial planning webinar for law enforcement officers that will be coming out for public sector workers. It's super informative. The webinar will cover essential topics such as budgeting, savings for retirement, and understanding in depth the benefits of different retirement plans like the 457. And it really is directed to rookie officers to help them understand the journey and maybe collect the tools along the way to help plan for financial success. So I don't think it's something that you want to miss. It was very interesting, and certainly we're looking forward to putting that out there to our listeners because I think there's a lot of benefit to that.
Thank you, Troy, and really thank you, Art. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes of what I'm sure is a busy day to share some of your, really valuable insights and experiences with us and our audience today. Thank you again to Mission Square for being such a generous partner of ours. I know that we as an organization are biased. We love all things Mission Square, but I'm convinced that this is a really important topic particularly for young police officers. And I'm hopeful that some of the topics that we have brought up today will sort of plant a seed with young police officers out there working the streets today and get them thinking about these sort of long-term financial decisions, and perhaps getting them thinking about using a service like Mission Squares to help them plan for their future. So again, Art, just incredibly appreciative. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you again to Mission Square.
Absolutely, Art. It was great having you here, and really, I think speaking directly to rookie officers, giving them a tool that I don't know that they think enough about, or that is discussed enough at the early stages, the nascent stages in these careers. I think it's important that you shared your knowledge and really discussed so much about what Mission Square offers. I think that's a key factor in really planning for the future. So thanks again.
Well, thank you, Bill and Troy. It's been a great honor to be here and really share this important information. So thank you again.
I'd like to thank Mission Square once again for their ongoing support, and a special thank you to our guest for this podcast. And thank you for listening to another Lifeline program. Until next time, be safe and be well.
Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct. The NLEOMF is not a current client or investor of MissionSquare Retirement and its affiliated entities, MissionSquare. MissionSquare partners with the NLEOMF at a cost of $150,000. This endorsement is a benefit of the paid partnership, which means that the NLEOMF was indirectly compensated for this endorsement. This represents a material conflict of interest because the NLEOMF has a financial incentive to recommend MissionSquare.